What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Fedwatch. My name is Ansel Lindner, and I am here with CK underscore Snarks. How are you doing, CK?
What's up, Ansel? I got quite the setup here. Q upgraded the home base setup for me, so excited to jump in with some high fidelity audio.
Awesome. Yeah, I love the digs there. I saw is he just across the table from you?
No, I switched spots with him, but he
Okay.
he left the little studio we got set up here at the BTC or the Bitcoin Magazine studios.
Awesome.
Hey,
Awesome.
best damn macro show on the internet. Thank you very much. Let's get it, baby.
Hell yeah.
Ansel's the best analyst on the internet. I'm just some idiot.
Oh, no. There's people much better than I. I just learned from the best. But I was in the chat before the show, and some people are calling me Ransel, and I don't know if I like that nickname. But as soon as I say I don't like it, then it's going to become a thing. So, but
Oh
anyway,
man.
thanks for watching, everybody. Big show lined up. We're
Yeah, a
going
lot
to
of
talk,
international stuff.
yeah, a couple stories one that might be flying under the radar, and one obviously that everyone's talking about, Taiwan and China.
Hmm.
But before that, thought we'd talk about the Bitcoin chart and maybe some currencies and go from there.
Let's do it.
All right. So up front, the first one here is the Bitcoin weekly chart. This is the one that Q seems to like a lot. It shows the volume by price on the right-hand side. And man, the weekly candles have just been so boring, no volatility. I mean, pretty much flat for the last 3 weeks. If you go to the next image, that is zooming out a little bit. And I tried to look for a comparable time to this. Maybe you could say early 2022, but I think it's more comparable to some of those candles that we saw back in September, October of 2020. So, Christian, what are you thinking about the price? What do you think about the charts? Where do you think we are in the Bitcoin cycle? All that.
I mean, it's tough to tell right now. Generally speaking, the longer that we kind of stay at a similar price range, the scarier it gets that it might just dump down. I like to see momentum. So the chart right now, it looks like higher highs and higher lows. But if we just keep seeing, drawn out kind of consolidation, it could always dump down. And we've seen bear markets where it's consolidated or even had a little rally, only for people to dump. I really like to look at what miners are doing, especially public miners. They have to report their sales, and a lot of miners. I saw a tweet; it was really interesting. A lot of public miners are selling more Bitcoin than they're mining right now. So that means they're selling the rip, and that is obviously an indicator of a general bearish scenario. Obviously, I think that people should be in position to stack. You should have cash flow. You should have some dry powder at all times. But yeah, I mean, nothing new here. What do you think?
Well, that's an interesting stat. So I think the net accumulation by miners is still positive, though, correct?
I mean, I honestly don't know much. It's just quarterly reporting from these public miners, and it
Okay.
sounds like they're selling the rip still.
From the big names. Yeah, very interesting. I thought that I've been waiting for a nice big green candle on the weekly, but that has not come to fruition. So yeah, I'm starting to think that this is somewhat of a bear flag. I hate to say that, but we could dip a little bit here. I don't know. I'm still extremely bullish and 50-50 in the near term. Really, I'm not bearish or bullish, but I think we could rip. We could also dip a little bit here. So, okay, let's go to the next chart. That is the dollar DXY. I just want to update this because we talk about the dollar a lot here. And just to give a weekly update or bi-weekly update or whatever, we have the top kind of seems like it's in, but it has not fallen. We had a big rally and we have not seen a big dip consolidation here in the dollar. And I really don't expect that. Nothing in my analysis of the dollar has changed over the last couple weeks. But one thing that has changed over the last couple weeks is if you go to image 4, this is the Hong Kong Monetary Authority press release. So if Chris, can you go to the next image, number 4? There we go. So every month they come out with their balance sheet. You know, how many foreign reserves are they still holding? And remember, they are pegged to the US dollar at 7.75 to 7.85 in a small little range. When it starts going towards that 7.85 and threatening to break out above that, that means that they have to actually sell dollars and buy Hong Kong dollars. So it's very important to know what their foreign reserve balance is. And I was expecting this to be a pretty big drop from last month. It came in at, let's see, 447 billion. And I thought we could get down to maybe 400 billion or something like that. But really, it's only been a $5 or $6 billion drop in their foreign reserves. So I'm thinking that the Hong Kong dollar is actually quite stable at this point. And that tells me that the kind of pressure in the financial system is less bad than I thought it was. So that's all I have for currencies. Do you have any thoughts on that or thoughts on Bitcoin in the next couple of weeks, Christian?
I mean, I would say I'm unsure if stability in the financial system is bullish or bearish for Bitcoin. It seems like maybe a return back to normal, a little bit of stability is rocket fuel for all assets. But on the flip side, the narrative is supposed to be that Bitcoin is going to, replace the system. Bitcoin, when the system fails, that's good for Bitcoin's price. So
Yeah.
I feel like that's something that's kind of difficult to square still.
Yeah, the common idea is that Bitcoin is a hedge against these bad economic times coming in the future. When the market is doing well, I mean, what's the narrative for Bitcoin to do well? But hey, it's been correlated with stocks recently as well. And if stocks are going to go higher, then Bitcoin will probably go higher. And everything is good for Bitcoin, like you tweet out all the time. Everything is good for Bitcoin. So bull markets, bear markets, doesn't matter. Bitcoin will continue to kind of mutate and grow. So,
well, that's the thing is like what I think people don't accept fully is that like Bitcoin has no standards. Bitcoin has no morals. Bitcoin has no boundaries. Like, Bitcoin is just gonna like take whatever opportunity is in front of it. It has no choice. It is. There's a Bitcoin Tina quote that Bitcoin's like water. You can't stop it, and it gets everywhere. So, eventually. Eventually it's going to seep into every aspect of the internet, every aspect of businesses around us, into all of the political and, geopolitical game theoretic incentives. It's going to seep into all of that. So, I mean, that's why everything is good for Bitcoin, obviously, because, it has no boundaries. It's just going to do its thing.
right. And it's permissionless, right? So you can build. If it's a bull market, maybe there'll be different companies coming out with different products that will help Bitcoin during a bull market. And when it's a bear market, you'll have the opposite. So the permissionlessness makes it able to adapt.
Here's an interesting example. It's like during the bull market, people talk about how public miners accumulate too much hash rate and that, they're centralizing Bitcoin hash. And then in a bear market, you see public miners and large scale miners dumping coins, but you also see them getting forced to dump actual rigs. And if anything, they're subsidizing the price of rigs to get to America and get built for, I guess, smaller scale miners and plebs. So there's this kind of like cyclicality, this kind of positive reinforcing that are happening within the Bitcoin ecosystem that I think is derived from the good incentives that exist within Bitcoin.
Oh yeah, really good point. Also, as a free market, then you would expect luxury goods, which might be the brand new cutting edge miner, could be considered a luxury good. The free market makes it so the luxury good actually trickles down to the common people. So maybe that's kind of a comparison there too. Anything else to add on Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, keep stacking, y'all. There's a lot of uncertainty in the immediate term, but in the long term, the thesis is still sound. There are not making more Bitcoins, and there are a lot more people that are going to get into it. So it's really just a demand side thing, and I think the demand side is looking pretty bullish.
Yeah, especially when they see things like Pakistan, what we're going to get into next. So we saw, Sri Lanka collapse, right? That was about a month ago that the shit hit the fan over there, and they stormed their Capitol building or whatever. The same kind of looks like it's happening to Pakistan, and there's a couple of corollaries here. So of course, we all know that Sri Lanka was invaded by the WEF, the World Economic Forum, and they had kind of wrecked the agricultural sector of the economy by putting all of these ESG practices into effect. Very similar to how the Dutch are protesting this, and the Italians and the Poles and the Spanish, everyone over there in Europe are protesting these ESG effects on agriculture. Well, Pakistan is not immune from that. So Pakistan also has gotten a lot of money from the WEF. And this is a tweet from Imran Khan. That's their previous, I believe he's president, might be prime minister, but the head of their government. And he brought in the WEF. And now they have, spent hundreds of millions in Pakistan on agriculture, as well as possibly taking land away from agriculture and putting it towards national parks. So you can see kind of the trade-off that the WEF is pushing, but people are starving, right? So you don't necessarily want to get rid of your agricultural land. That's a corollary, or the same thing with Sri Lanka, but also China is in this ballgame. So China was a big player in Sri Lanka. They gave a bunch of high interest rate debt to Sri Lanka and forced them to bankrupt themselves to pay off this debt. And in the end, when they couldn't, they ended up taking the port, taking possession of the port. I don't know what's going to come of that in Sri Lanka, but the big port there was taken over by China. Now, Pakistan is also high on the list of getting Chinese debt. So I think Pakistan owes Chinese companies, not just the main like state-run banks, but other companies as well, over $20 billion. And these are high yielding debt. I think it's roughly 6% on these Chinese loans, where the international average, like if you're lending to government or whatever, it's about 3 to 4%. So they're almost paying double to these Chinese lenders. So that is two very similar things with these two countries. And my kind of thinking on this is China has a lot of problems on its own, but now two of their star pearls in their Belt and Road initiative are going under. So I think it's the next slide is the map. Let's go to the one with the map. It's slide number 7. So you can see Colombo, that's the capital of Sri Lanka, and this Gwadar is this Pakistani port. And these were two very important nodes on the maritime route of the Belt and Road, as well as Pakistan having pipelines through it and everything. If Pakistan's government falls, perhaps the BRI also falls or has trouble. It's lost a lot of international clout over the last, I would say, 6 months with Sri Lanka. And if Pakistan, another very important node, goes down, BRI could have a really hard time ever coming to completion. So that's what I have for, let's see, what else? Do I have one more image? Yeah, that's if you go to number 6, let's do number 6. This is a chart of the Pakistani rupee, and this year it's down 35%. And that's just the tail end of this crash that's been going on. But the rupee is crashing. The government is only about 2 months away from total default. I think they said they have 2 months left of international reserves to help pay their debt. They're reaching out everywhere to try to find somebody to lend them money to get them through this next period. China has said no. The Arab states have said no. And now it looks like they're going back to the IMF. Now, the problem with the IMF is, there's always austerity attached. So the IMF said, okay, we'll rescue you, but you need to cut your subsidies on fuel, and impose all these austerity measures in your country and cut corruption and all of that stuff. So that is Pakistan's hard choice right now. Will they be able to do it? We will see. But the clock is ticking. The next couple months should be very interesting stuff going on, developments happening in Pakistan. And that's all I have on Pakistan. What do you got to respond with that, Christian?
I mean, one, it's really, really sad to see it all go down, but this has been something that has been talked a lot about on Fedwatch and in Bitcoin circles. But the kind of domino fall of fiat currencies and unstable regimes that were built on trash policies that were kind of just financed by fast and easy credit. All of that is starting to grind down to a halt, and we're starting to see these, nationwide uh, destructions of credibility and defaults and destruction of fiat value. And again, it's insane to see the dollar just acting as this kind of like wrecking ball going and murdering fiat. But ultimately, uh, it's just like a sign of things are breaking, is that the dollar is destroying fiat, and at the same time the dollar is getting crushed against every other hard asset. So um it's amazing to watch in real time, honestly, like we're living through history. And I think it's really important to point out, all of these, like I said, all of these examples, they're connected to China, they're connected to the WEF, they're connected to easy money that effectively created some sort of narrative, action, policy, initiatives, whether it's support, whether it's different farming practices, that could not have been sustained and could not have been put into motion without that easy credit, without that, uh, super mark, kind of greater than the market activity. So I guess I'm kind of going on a rant here, but there's a very clear through line in general between these two examples, and I think we're just going to see a lot more of this to come. So I'm curious, Ansel. Do you have an indication of what's the next domino to fall? Like Sri Lanka, Pakistan. Maybe are we looking at more countries on this board? We've been talking about Europe being in a tough situation in general. Maybe it's the EU, but I could definitely see some smaller independent nation states going first.
Yeah, well, specifically in the realm of the Belt and Road stuff, I think Central Asia is going to have problems. Um, right now, they seem to be fairly united with Russia, and China is being a big supporter of the situation over there in Russia and Ukraine. But the Central Asia has a lot of problems, because historical problems, historically ethnic problems, and the U.S. left $5 billion worth of equipment in Afghanistan. Now, Afghanistan is Pakistan's neighbor. It's also neighbors with Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan and all these other places. So I can see maybe some economic problems moving up into Central Asia from Pakistan. That would be my kind of wag at the future at this point.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, again, it's hard to tell when, where the next kind of crack is going to emerge, but I think the only thing that's guaranteed is that more fiat debt-driven systems are going to continue to fall. Do we
Yeah.
want to jump over to another kind of crack in geopolitics, which is what's happening with Taiwan and China?
Yeah. So before we bring up that chart, I just wanted to give a little background. So I didn't know where to start exactly on this. I know our audience is probably up to speed on all of the major developments. Nancy Pelosi went over to China and against the express wishes of the CCP, they really talked really tough that she is not welcome, et cetera, et cetera. But she went anyway, and nothing really happened. So if you guys would join me on my Telegram live streams, I was kind of following this day by day and saying, no, China's not going to do anything. This is not going to amount to anything. And that's pretty much what we saw. After she left, they did start some military exercises. And so I have an image of that one. So if we could bring up slide number 8. This is just a map of some of the areas around Taiwan that they were doing strikes with their long-range missiles. They're also using their naval assets to go in and out of those boxes. The darker boxes closer to the Chinese coast, they are the historical kind of military exercise areas. These pink ones or the orange ones, whatever color that is, they are those are the new ones. And you can see number 4 is directly over Taiwan, and the missiles that they fired from mainland China were visible from Taipei. So that's pretty significant. But overall, it was not really that strong of a reaction. They launched a few missiles, they did a few things, but everyone knew that they weren't, at least I think most analysts, geopolitical analysts, knew that China wasn't going to attempt anything. I have a few quotes here that I wanted to read through. The first one is from, what's his name? Wang Yi. He's the foreign minister in China, I think the foreign minister to Taiwan. And he had a speech on the 5th, and that is the day I think Nancy Pelosi arrived in Taipei. And he was talking really strong. At the time, I pointed out that the Chinese, they're really into the art of war, and they're going to look strong where they're weak. And so all of this really strong rhetoric building up to this trip told me that they were weak there. We'll get a little bit more into that on the next quote. But here, this is what Yang Wei had to say, or Wang Yi. He stressed that the U.S. attempt to use the Taiwan card to contain China is only wishful thinking. It will by no means hold back the historical trend of Taiwan return to the motherland, nor can it stop the historical progress towards great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. The Taiwan Independence Forces attempt to seek independence by soliciting U.S. support is nothing but a fantasy, which is doomed to be a dead end, and it will only tighten the noose around their necks. Skipping down a little bit, regarding the U.S. allegation that China is changing the status quo in the Taiwan Strait, Wang Yi, said that this is an out-and-out lie and groundless accusation. Taiwan has never been a country. There is only one China in the world, and both sides of the Taiwan Strait belong to the one and same China. This has been the status quo of Taiwan since ancient times. Yeah, right. Since the Democratic Progressive Party took office, that is the ruling party in Taiwan, it has been pushing for incremental Taiwan independence and de-Sinanization or de-Chinanization, and trying to create the false impression of two Chinas or one China and one Taiwan on various occasions. Isn't this blatantly changing the status quo? If Mr. Wang Yat-sen were still alive, he would tell Tai Ing-wen, I think that's the president of Taiwan, that lady that met with Nancy Pelosi, to her face that she has betrayed her ancestors. And in another translation, I read that after ancestors, he said, and his race. So she has betrayed her ancestors and her race. So that's the type of rhetoric you're getting from China. Christian, stop me if you want to, but I'm going on to the next thing here.
I mean, it's just wild. Can you imagine that kind of rhetoric from any Western, politician? It's just, it is really wild. But I mean, you've been calling weakness here, and I'm sure as we continue to talk about China, we're going to talk about how poor their position is geopolitically.
Yes, and domestically. So it's starting to change a little bit domestically as well. We've talked about the boycotts of the mortgages of the pre-sale homes. We've talked about bank runs going on in China. So domestically, they're having problems. But and this case is no different. So here's another article. I'll include it in the show notes. I'll link to this because this is the first time I've read this blog. But it's from ChinaTalk.media, and the headline is "Elite China Copes with Pelosi Visit." Nationalists and moderates alike cope with China's underwhelming reaction and turned the PLA into a Weibo laughing stock. The example they cite here is someone put that chart that I just showed you, the map of the exercise areas on Weibo, and this was the top response. Quote, "I get not going to war, but next time don't talk so tough. It's embarrassing to listen to." The next quote, "So useless. We're a laughing stock." Next quote, "Rather, we'd save the money." So the Chinese netizens, as they're called over there, are not too impressed with the reaction from the CCP, the reaction from the PLA, and their think tanks as well. So scrolling down in this article that I have here, this is a quote from Professor Wang Wen. Wang serves as the executive dean at the Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies at Renmin University in China, and he's the executive director of the China-U.S. People-to-People Exchange Research Center. So he's supposedly some big think tank guy over there. He has a bunch of quotes in this article, but I'm just going to hone in on like 5 paragraphs here. "Some netizens were disappointed that we had not used the opportunity to carry out an armed reunification with Taiwan, but they underestimate the wisdom of the present response. It is brilliant and rational, and it represents China as a responsible and peaceful global power. In terms of military power, China is more than capable of toppling Taiwan. That is reunifying with Taiwan by force. However, as I previously stated, armed reunification is a necessary but not sufficient condition for the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation." So they're talking about reunification, but I thought they were one China. I thought this is the whole policy that, one China here, one China in the Wang, what was this, Wang Yi's statements just a minute ago. Everything is about one China, but he's saying right here that they have to reunify with China by force. Anyway, continuing on, not only do we need to consider when to start the reunification process, but also how to best serve our national rejuvenation following the reunification. The crux is that China needs to outperform the U.S. in terms of economic power, attain financial and military strength comparable to that of the U.S., and develop an overwhelming capacity to counter international sanctions. By doing this, the U.S. will no longer be able to form an external force to interfere in our affairs after the reunification in the long run. Consider what would have happened if Pelosi's plane had been shot down, as some have speculated, or if armed forces had been used directly against Taiwan. Such actions could have resulted in a major military clash between China and America, possibly leading to world war. A major military clash with the U.S. is not the goal of China's foreign policy, nor is it the path to a better life for the common people. That's very important. The think tank folks over there in China are saying war with the West is not the path to a better life for the common people. Continuing, recall that Sun Tzu wrote in The Art of War, "Do not act unless there is something to gain. Do not use military force without the certainty of victory. Do not go to war unless the situation is critical." And that's what I have from these two. Kind of, this is the Chinese and the Taiwan posts, their internet over there. So passing it back to you, Christian, what are your thoughts on what was just said there?
It's really interesting to hear the different perspectives from, the people in China, the people kind of like involved with the situation. the people kind of more on the ground. When it comes to kind of the netizens being critical, I'm honestly a little shocked to hear the negative criticism, just because my assumption was that there really wasn't any critical free speech that was allowed or sanctioned, or possible. So, I personally am not a China expert. So I was a little shocked by, even that amount of disdain and that amount of, kind of critical commentary being tolerated. But with that being said, when you are looking at what is happening in China right now, like you said, domestically, people, despite this kind of totalitarian, uh, dystopian, techno surveillance state, people are still rising up. People are still getting fed up. So there is a point where enough people will break with the CCP and break with the enforcement. And once that happens, we could really see something crazy happen in China. So the fact that people are kind of emboldened and are becoming more emboldened, it'll be really interesting to see how it continues to shake out. But to be honest, like kind of going back to Nancy Pelosi going over to Taiwan, I was pretty surprised by the move. Generally speaking, I'm not the biggest Nancy Pelosi fan. Um, but it does seem to have been kind of a very strong and correct geopolitical move on her part, uh, despite a lot of criticism that was kind of happening beforehand. What's kind of your take there? I know that you also kind of agreed that, from a geopolitical perspective, that it was a shining moment for or Congresswoman Pelosi.
Yeah, well, I despise her as well. I don't agree with what she's doing, but what I thought was that this was a kind of a big brain move for the U.S. apparatus, because China had no response to this. They're really weak with their credit collapse happening. I don't really have too many updates for the credit collapse this week, but so the credit collapse happening, plus this Belt and Road initiative with all of their kind of satellites that they are setting up along this Belt and Road, seems to be collapsing. And now Pelosi snubs gives them middle finger across the Taiwan Strait. That is, to me, kind of exposing the weakness of China, and that really probably was humiliating. Now, from like a CCP perspective, I'm no think tank person on the CCP, but I do follow several people that talk about this all the time. And my opinion is, this could weaken Xi quite a bit. And if Xi goes down, they have the 20th Party Congress coming up later this year. What is going to happen with that? There's going to be a lot of tension over there in China. This is not a time for them to start war, to start some conflict. So we could see something else. We could see some other provoking of China, perhaps sailing of a carrier through the Taiwan Strait. I don't know, but this is, and maybe I'm blind, because I look out at China and I see collapse coming. And a lot of people that I talk to, people in my Telegram channel, they always constantly ask me about the state of the U.S. and civil war in the U.S. and I don't see it, but maybe I am just blind to the problems in the U.S. and I'm seeing all these problems around the world. But I really do think that China is in the weakest spot right now, even weaker than Europe, which is surprising to say. So those are my thoughts on
Yeah.
Nancy Pelosi.
Do we want to hit on this graphic that you have documenting the failed payments from these Chinese developers?
Sure. Yeah, so I couldn't really find too much new stuff. I do know that the central government is trying now to bail a few people out, a couple billion here and a couple billion there. But this is a multi-billion, 100 billion or $1 trillion problem. So a couple billion here or there, it might just take the edge off for cronies, certain friends of the CCP, but it's not going to stop the total collapse of the real estate market. This chart right here is just showing the number of Chinese developers who have failed to pay their suppliers, not that have defaulted on their debt, but have failed to pay their suppliers and probably are having trouble completing projects or even starting projects. I don't know, but in June it got up to 62%, which is 62% of all the Chinese property developers are having problems paying their bills.
That's big.
Yeah.
And this escalated quickly. It started at about a quarter at the beginning of the year, and it didn't take very long to get to over 50%.
Yeah, but you can see it did kind of slow down a little bit. It was at 61% in May and 62% in June. So perhaps there is some relief in the near future, but I don't know. I think that credit collapses happen, in acute phases. So perhaps they're just waiting for the next shoe to drop.
Yep, gradually then suddenly. That's typically how it goes. So it would be scary if that gets to 100%. Obviously we're already getting there, but again, when you build based on cheap credit, this is what happens. That's kind of the point about why we endorse Bitcoin, is because Bitcoin is this economic substrate that actually incentivizes for appropriate allocation of capital. And that's going to make a better world with a lot less waste, a lot less pollution, and hopefully happier people.
Yes, I did hear some other news as well about billionaires. So, Jack Ma, he's the Alibaba founder and Ant Group and all that.
Yep.
He recently got out of the country. So he gave up his controlling interest in his companies, and now I think he's in Europe somewhere. A lot of billionaires, I've heard this through the kind of grapevine or the macro rumor mill, that there's a lot of billionaires over there in China, maybe 100 or so, that want to get out of the country. And this is all coming to a head as well. Now, how do they flee? How do they flee with their money? They can't flee with yuan. They can't flee with $1 billion in gold, but they could flee with some Bitcoin. So we'll see if that puts a bid under the market. Uh-oh, you're muted.
We've been talking about how Bitcoin is primed to benefit from capital flight that is going to be happening within collapsing economies like Europe, potentially within Asia and China in particular. So that's definitely part of the thesis here for Bitcoin, is that these are two separate systems: the collapsing debt fiat system and then the burgeoning Bitcoin system. And people are bridging between them. And as Bitcoin grows, it becomes a better and more palatable, economic space for people to build an economy and continue to build forward. So hopefully, as Bitcoin's features of permissionlessness, censorship resistance, digital bearer nature, all of those fantastic aspects of Bitcoin that we know and love, that makes it a great tool for people to eventually transition to that system as they need to leave where they're at, need to abandon the existing system.
Absolutely. And that's all I have on China. That's all. I didn't prepare anything on Europe. I thought we'd take a break from Europe this week. And
Too much Europe bashing. Europe needs Bitcoin. Listen to my podcast with Stefan Livera.
I mean, they should have come out with their CPI. I didn't even see that released from the Europeans yet. But the U.S. is having the CPI come out tomorrow. So what are the experts expecting? I don't know. I've been expecting to have CPI fall for the last few months, and that hasn't come true. But this month, even the Chicago or the Cleveland Fed, who puts out the inflation now predictor, we've talked on the show here about the GDP now. That is from the Atlanta Fed, and that's pretty accurate, I think. But the inflation now from the Cleveland Fed is saying that they expect this month to have the month-over-month CPI at 0.3% and the year-over-year CPI at 8.8%. 8%. So that would be down from 9.1 to 8.8, and down on the month over month from 1% down to 0.3%. I look a lot more, or I care a lot more about the month over month rate, because I think the year over year can hide a lot of nuance and a lot of different things that aren't obvious at first glance. So I like the month over month rate. That's what I got for CPI, man. That's it.
So CPI is finally going to go down. You've been calling for this for a while. Hasn't happened quite yet. What does that justify the Fed pivoting, or how does that affect the narrative?
Well, Powell has called for that he will pivot, or he will reevaluate his monetary policy when there are multiple months of consecutive PCE inflation declines. So this is the other measure, not CPI, but it's PCE, and that's the one that Powell really likes and the Fed usually uses. So if there's multiple month over month declines, that's when he will look at possibly pivoting. But I don't think it's up to them anyway. The market is in control. The market is going to tell them what's up. The 3-month, 10-year spread is still crashing. I think it got down to 11 basis points this morning when I checked it. So it is, everything about this market is screaming recession. It's screaming tight dollars, and the Fed has to, eventually they have to act, or people will just ignore them.
I guess what does that look like in terms of they have to act? Does that mean they have to pivot? But even if they pivot, do people still ignore them? I think that's potentially what could happen down the line once the myth of the Fed is bust. But I guess you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Well, the Fed gets their power from mythology around the Fed, and they have power. Their main power is in panic reduction. So if there's a acute crisis, they can come in and say, "Hey, I got your guys' back. I'm going to be a lender of last resort. I'll buy up whatever you need. Just calm down. It's okay. The market is not going to crash." And so they can talk the market into calming down and not panic selling everything. But this monetary policy stuff, they really don't have any slow walk capability. So what's going to happen is Powell is just kind of matching what's already going on in the market. That's my opinion. So if you look at his position last summer, so let's rewind to the summer of 2021. Inflation was starting to tick up. I believe in April, it broke 2%. And then by June, it was like 6% or something. So it was starting to tick up. And Powell was looking at this, and he thought it was transitory. But it kept going, and he needed to do something. He knew that a recession was coming because of, if prices increase, then eventually people aren't going to be able to afford more things, and that's going to slow down the economy, right? So he's already looking forward a year, saying there's going to be a recession in a year, and he did actually see that, because I believe there was a recession that in the first 2 quarters of this year. So he saw that coming. So to get ahead of that, what did he have to do? He had to pivot hard. He had to pivot really hard and get ahead of the narrative into tightening. And that's what he has done. Now he's continued on that narrative until something forces him to change, until the narrative goes the other way. Then he will race to get in front of that narrative. That's how the central bank works. They look like they're so confident, and they keep doing their thing for a long period of time, and then they flip on a dime and they go the other way. I don't see that this is going to be anything different. The Fed is going to do their MO is not going to change. Powell has even done this before, right? Powell did a pivot in 2019, exactly like this. After raising rates to roughly the same level, actually, he paused. He paused, and they were doing QT. He stopped QT and immediately started QE and cut interest rates. So he's already done a pivot like that. So I just expect Powell, his MO, to come back once again. So that's what I would say, explain the Powell pivot and where I see the Fed and how they're going to react in coming months.
So pivot in the fall in conjunction with economic crisis.
Pivot in the fall. We will have to see what the rates are doing. I do think they will pivot, yes, because the 10-year is dropping. But if the 10-year stops dropping, then maybe they won't pivot till next year. We'll see. But the market is going to be in charge, not Powell. You'll be able to look at the yield curves and inflation expectations and stuff like that, and say, okay, well, Powell is going to pivot. So, by the way, inflation expectations are starting to come down as well. Not only the market-driven inflation expectations, so what we kind of algorithmically derive from market rates on yields and things, you can see what is the expected or implied expected inflation. Those have always stuck around 2 to 2.5%, and they remain at that same level. But even CPI expectations are starting to turn over and come down. These are numbers done by the New York Fed. So all in all, it does look like the economy is slowing down. People think recession is here and CPI is going to fall. So that leaves room now for Powell to say, see, I told you so. Now I'm going to come in and help the market to a soft landing by cutting. It's all just narrative management.
Yeah, I mean, again, I just would like to zoom out and say, we live in a system where the monetary order is managed by central bankers that, one, don't control the system, two, at best are trying to get in front of the narrative and appear as if they are in control and manage, effectively do crisis management. Like, that is not a very sturdy base in which to build an economy. And that's kind of why we are forced to watch the Fed. We're forced to pay attention to these meetings. We're forced to report on these projections, but hopefully on a better system. These types of wasteful allocations of capital, wasteful uses of our human time, unproductive uses, will lessen. That's the high level idea here. So for now, you have to watch the Fed. You have to kind of understand what's going on. And if anything, the Fed is becoming more and more important to your daily life, just because if assets are important and what the Fed does affects your assets and the way that you store your value, then you're going to have to be paying attention to it. I know a great Bitcoiner, Matt Odell, he talks about the book The Mandibles. But in the book The Mandibles, the world is hyper financialized and people are very in tune with everything that's happening with central bankers and global reserve currencies, and investing in assets, because it is a huge part of their lives. And really, what Bitcoin is offering is kind of a return back to nature, a move away from having to everyone being a stock picker, and for people to just focus on what they care about or what they're skilled in, rather than having to double as an investor as well as a global macro analyst, as well as whatever you do for your profession. So I really do think that we are living in this kind of crazy time in history that is very, very unique, and we are hopefully going to return back to a relationship with value that is a lot more simple.
Yeah, I'll have to read that. I haven't heard of that book, The Mandibles, but it's also less efficient, right? The you want the people with a comparative advantage in investing and in macro and in banking and how to allocate capital. You want these people that are good at that job to be the ones in charge of allocating capital. And if you have everybody doing it on their own and everybody is like a self-directed portfolio manager, that's a very inefficient way, because most people, right, lose in the market. So that's not going to get the best results. Once you take that out of their hands and you allow them to concentrate on what they're good at. So why does a dentist need to be worried about how his portfolio is doing on an hour to hour basis? He should worry about uh, you know filling the cavities or doing what he needs to do on the dental work, not worrying about his portfolio. So uh, the economy will grow when people that are best at doing certain things do those certain things. And anyway, I just thought of that when you're talking.
No, totally. And I mean, this is kind of an idea that I got from you, which is Bitcoin aligns incentives. The Bitcoin ecosystem, people will migrate to it because that's where growth will be. And I've been on this kind of separate talk track that I'm trying to push Bitcoiners to be more bullish. And one of the things I try to unpack a little bit is, Bitcoiners like to talk about infinity divided by 21 million. But when you're doing that calculation, you not only have to take today's infinity and divide it by 21 million, and derive some sort of value per sat, but you also actually have to analyze and try to like forecast what growth into the future will look like under a Bitcoin standard. Because effectively, what Bitcoin does is it creates a better and more productive world by, you know, removing all this waste and baggage that's existing in the current financial ecosystem. And that will actually increase the infinity, right? So if you have a better system for allocating capital and for people to be more productive and to create more growth and to propel us beyond where we are today, that is actually going to make the infinity bigger, right? It's going to have a world with more value. So if anything, Bitcoiners need to be even more bullish, because not only are we going to hyper Bitcoinize what we have today, but we're building a better system that will actually create more wealth for the future. And if you don't
Mm,
believe me, then I would challenge you to go look back onto any, technological advance on Bitcoin's magnitude, which you could argue that there potentially never has been one. But, even if you look at the creation of the internet, or the creation of gunpowder, or the creation of fossil fuels, these things have unlocked a new paradigm of economic value that was never before possible. So Bitcoiners should be getting very bullish. I think they should be greedy at these prices, especially why people are fearful. But obviously, stay very kind of conservative in terms of don't put yourself in a position where you're forced to sell if Bitcoin goes against you in the short term. Because even Ansel and I, we pay a ton of attention to Bitcoin. We pay a ton of attention to what's happening global macro, and we still can't even tell you what is going to happen in the
mm.
next few days price wise.
Yeah, I mean that the reminds me of fixed pie versus growing pie, right? So
Yep.
there's some people out there that think that there's a fixed pie out there, and the rich get the fixed pie. That's why they're rich, and everyone else is left with a small portion of the pie. But capitalists think that there is a growing pie. So let's make the pie bigger for everybody. So if you're looking to extend that analogy to Bitcoin, I would say like the dollar system is a fixed pie. And when you look out at the future, you see low growth and low inflation in the dollar because we're doing deglobalization. We are at the end of diminishing marginal returns on debt. And so you see a fixed pie that there's some rich people already have that, a lot of that fixed pie. Or you look at Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is this beautiful growing pie that, hey, I could just jump in here and grow with the entire economy. And so I think that's going to be that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we agree. Bitcoin is hope, as Michael Saylor likes to say.
Yeah.
And we didn't even talk about, in terms of growing the pie, Bitcoin is providing financial services to the global south that has been largely ignored for all of fintech. So just by bringing those people online, just by saving them from the destitute that is their fiat and debt-based currencies. I'm weaving in debt-based currencies now because Ansel has corrected me that we
Yes,
don't actually even have fiat currencies
it's not
anymore.
fiat. Yeah.
Ansel, I guess a slight side note: did you listen to the Stephan Livera podcast. I'm shouting out Stephan Livera. He's been killing it. But his show with Pierre Richard about how we're on a full reserve. We're on a full reserve fiat system now.
No, I didn't listen to that. And I was on there a couple weeks ago, right before you went on there.
Yeah.
And I didn't listen to the episode because I hate listening to myself. I don't even watch these live streams afterwards. So, but yeah, this Stephan Livera has been crushing it. What did Pierre Richard say?
You know, I think you're going to have to listen to that one, and we are going to have to get Pierre on the show because I think he has some interesting contrarian points about what is actually happening in the fiat / debt-based system that we find ourselves in, credit-based system that we find ourselves in. Ansel, we need to wrap it up. We got 1 minute. Where can people find you?
BitcoinandMarkets.com, free newsletter every Friday. You can also check me out on Telegram, t.me/Bitcoin and markets. I do a live stream there every day, trying to do 15 minutes of live stream a day. See how long I can keep that going. You can also follow me on Twitter at Ansel Lindner. Christian, where can they find you?
CK_snarks. I'm shit posting on Twitter all the time, every day. So, and here on Fedwatch. That's those are pretty much the two exclusive places that I shit post. But Ansel, it was a good rip. Chris, our producer, says that you got a shout out on Corey Clipston's episode of What is Money Show with Robert Breedlove. So a much deserved shout out. You should get more of those. But until then, everyone, make sure to follow Ansel. Make sure to follow me, and enjoy getting back in with the hosts. And no, I've not tried Butter of the Gods yet, but that video you sent me looks awesome.
I don't know where Q and P are, but I think we're going to call it a wrap here. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Q's coming back.
Oh, there he is.
We're in the studio, baby. Chris, haircut looks nice, man.
Thanks, man.
Stay bullish, y'all. Go to Bitcoin Amsterdam.
See you guys.
Promo code CK10. Save yourself 10% off.
PM Live.
See you, chat.
PM Live, motherfucker.